welcome to what's called the Executive Member for Transport Decision Session on January the 18th, 2022. Although I need to note that because of COVID precautions and the lack of provision in the government legislation for council meetings that are not in person, the recommendations that I make today will be formally approved by the Chief Operating Officer. First item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Although I'm very much welcome item 5 and 6 and know all the speakers well, I don't have any declarations of interest other than those points to make for transparency. So moving on to item 2, which is public speakers. This morning I have 5 public speakers, and the first of those is Councillor Myers, who wishes to speak, I believe, on the Burton Stone Lane item. Do we have Councillor Myers on the line?
Hi there, Andy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. If you want to start when you're ready, and I'll just take up to 3 minutes to make the points you want to make.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'd like to speak to item 5, Burton Stone Lane improvements this morning, and in line with our formal consultation response, I wanted to outline our support as ward councillors for the recommended option, which is option 3, which would see Annex E approved and implemented. I'd like to thank officers for their work on producing the scheme and their report. I'd like to say that the budget for the scheme is available in full from the Clifton Ward Highways budget, which we've been holding on to this sum since May 2019, trying to progress the scheme, and we therefore hope that work can start as soon as possible. The current speed humps on this section of Burton Stone Lane are deteriorating, and they're not doing the job of slowing traffic speeds, and worse than that, they've been easy for cars to straddle, which has pushed them close to the narrow footpaths and curb, and it makes it feel very unsafe. The proposed full width speed table at the southern section really would set the tone for considerate driving as you enter Burton Stone Lane from Clifton's main road, and drivers will notice that the road layout is more fitting of a residential area, and driving behaviours should reflect that change. The 2 narrow priority narrowing sections will also break up the straight and open road layout that currently exists. And further along the stretch, we're pleased that there will be another full width speed table when the Duncan Barracks site is developed. We consider that an appropriate extension of this speed reduction scheme. And all in all, these measures really should make it feel safer for pedestrians using the footpath and for cyclists using the route too. Finally, a final point to make really is to say that option 4 and Annex F really is a new addition to the whole debate. We believe as ward councillors we'd have to disregard this option outright because of it being a very late additional option post formal consultation, and in our view it wouldn't support the aims of the scheme to reduce speeds and bring about more considerate driving. So with that said, we'd really urge the executive member to support option 3 as recommended in the report, and that would see Annex E implemented at Burton Stone Lane. Thank you very much, Chair.
Oh, you're on mute, Chair.
Oops, thank you. I knew I'd do that. My second speaker is York Cycle Campaign, who is, I believe, is going to be Robin Jankel, speaking on items 4 and 6. Are you there, Robin?
Yes, hello.
Hello. Do you want to tell us what you want to say about these items?
Okay. So Tadcaster Road scheme, York Cycle Campaign welcomes with interest the revised proposals and updates to this scheme and are happy to expand on the points made today. 1, Knavesmire Road widening. We support this and recommend the entry is improved to ease joining from Tadcaster Road. 2, Pullens Drive. We believe option 2B is inadequate, not best practice, and won't convince people Tadcaster Road is safe for cycling. Instead, the campaign strongly supports option 2C and its proposal to continue the off-road section of the cycle path along the Knavesmire. For the extra safety, reduction on impact to southbound traffic and increased attractiveness, we believe the cost to be justifiable, especially when compared to other costs given in item 4 of tonight's meeting. We also feel the inbound cycle path would benefit from a bus stop bypass. 3, Slingsby Road shops. We strongly advise the council not to pursue the design in Annex B. Running cyclists between parked cars and traffic offers no protection and is frequently referred to as murder lanes. Instead, we prefer a reversion to the LTN 120 compliant layout that is still shown in Annex A. The report refers to the change as being a result of concerns raised. What were these concerns and why have they taken precedence over best practice and the safety of vulnerable road users? The arrangement outside Dringhouse's library would also strongly benefit from a similar change. 4, Moor Lane Roundabout. The campaign considers its removal for tackling at a later date as a sensible move. The draft plans in Annex C are a good start, but will need continuing around all sides of the roundabout. 5, Moor Lane to Simbalk Lane. We welcome the change of arrangements alongside Tesco to a proper 2-way cycle track. We also welcome the introduced signalised crossing, but since it is outside the site of education, we suggest implementing a speed table and short 20-mile-per-hour zone in line with council policy. 6, segregation. The campaign welcomes the proposal to introduce physical segregation to the cycle lanes, and we hope to be part of conversations on their implementation. The document refers to LTN 120 compliant cycle lanes as being 1.5 metres wide, but for clarity, this is the recommended minimum width when there are other constraints. The actual recommended width is 2 metres. The plans don't give dimensions, so we don't know if 2 metres is provided where possible. Going forward, we hope lane widths will be dimensioned as a matter of course. Finally, no comments are mentioned about the junction with St Helens Road. Our junction assessment using the tool described in LTN 120 scored at 0 of a possible 12 points. Are changes to this junction still to be considered? And finally, other schemes. If pedestrians and then cyclists are at the top of York's transport hierarchy, then we wish to ask why transport schemes that benefit motorists, such as the Outer Ring Road, are being prioritised over ones which benefit active travel. One example is point 28 Coppergate, where the current design is dangerous and puts cyclists at risk. It has also been 10 months since the barrier report in point 29 was promised, and the active travel schemes as per Annex 3 have been pushed back yet again. However, we are pleased to hear that the design for Piccadilly is going to be amended and improved, and ask that the cycle campaign can be involved at an early stage in the design process. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, just on 3 minutes. Thank you for those comments. I'll ask officers to respond when we get a chance. So the next item is Councillor Melly, I believe, who wants to speak on item 3 and 6 and possibly 4 as well. Is Councillor Melly there?
Hi, yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Do you want to say what you want to say?
Yeah, great, thank you. On agenda item 3, specifically the petition relating to Irwin Avenue, please choose option 2 and make finding a solution something you fund next financial year. Heworth Ward councillors, Labour councillors, have been working with local residents on multiple problems in the area. As well as the specific issue in the petition, there are wider traffic issues around the Moulton Avenue, Heworth Green, Dodsworth Avenue area. Especially now that the Groves Low Traffic Neighbourhood Scheme has been made permanent, that is having knock-on effects on traffic in the residential areas around Dodsworth Avenue and Irwin Avenue. Transport projects should not be done in isolation, so perhaps you could instigate a wider traffic movement assessment of the area. Rather than just noting the petition, please do something about it and work with local residents and ward councillors to find solutions. On agenda item 4, Transport Capital Programme, the report includes a brief update on city centre access, or should that be lack of access? The report says that the hostile vehicle mitigation barriers will not be in place this financial year, so that means there are several months left of staffed barriers before the new bollards are installed. So why are blue badge holders being excluded? It won't be acceptable to refuse access once the barriers are in place, but until then, what risk assessments have been done? What specialist anti-terror briefings have you had? And what possible grounds do you have for discrimination against disabled people and not allowing blue badge holders through the staff barriers today? The report also includes an update on the review into inaccessible cycle barriers. For years, Labour councillors have been trying to remove inaccessible barriers in our wards, which restrict access to cycle and walking routes for mobility scooters, buggies and adapted cycles. That was halted last year when we were told not to spend ward funding on these schemes because it would be done essentially with this funding pot. But since then, there's been silence. 4 months ago, I spoke in public participation at one of your decision sessions like this and asked for an update because for months, all of my emails on the subject to you and to officers have been completely ignored. Here we are, 9 months on from the announcement, and I still haven't had any answers to my questions. So we've gone back to progressing individual ward schemes to rectify inaccessible barriers, but with almost a year of delay. Almost an extra year of transport assets that breach the Equality Act. Almost an extra year of people being excluded from transport routes due to disability. So I was glad to finally see an update in the report, except that the update is that nothing is being done. Apart from the barriers to Hobmore, which I'm really pleased about, there's been no progress at all for the other inaccessible barriers around the city. The report says that in a few months, initial survey work will be done, and then after that, an audit will be carried out. But there's nothing in the report about when something will actually be done to update these inaccessible barriers. Anyone following this saga would reasonably believe that you want disabled people to be barred from town and barred from country. The report says that there are no equalities implications for this agenda item because you're just noting a report, but there could be. Please, finally take this seriously, make removing barriers to access a priority and make advancements to equalities. Would you please consider that when you get to that agenda item? And I'm out of time to talk about agenda item 6, but other speakers have covered it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, and we'll ask officers to respond when we get to that item. The next item, speaker I have is Councillor Baker. Is Councillor Baker there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Do you want to give us your 3 minutes worth?
Thank you, Councillor de Gorn. And I am speaking in regards to the Monitor 2 report as well on page 19, paragraph 31, which talks about funding for improving the existing road closure at Victoria Bar in Micklegate Ward. It says that we are proposing to slip the funding from 21-22 into 22-23. To allow a scheme to be developed at the bar that incorporates all of the proposals of ward councillors and residents' wishes and the wider aims of the council's fourth local transport plan, which of course is to reduce traffic in the city centre. Now, that work hasn't continued, but I would very much ask you to please do slip that funding over into the next year so that we can keep it there and get that wider bit of work done at Victoria Bar to find a permanent solution as to whether how we access that area of the city in Bishop Hill and Micklegate. The issue is, though, as well as keeping the funding there, currently many residents are not happy with the situation at the moment in terms of safety and in terms of confusion over whether the bar is open or closed or which way. So, as Ward Councillor, York Green Party helped put out a survey across all the residents of Bishop Hill and Micklegate area with 3 questions. Would residents like to see Victoria Bar left fully open or closed permanently to motorised traffic and just open to pedestrians and cyclists and thereby introducing a new dedicated cycle route, or a third option, leave it open one way? Now, the resident response was quite good. I had 44 written responses to this survey, and over half said that long term they would like to see the bar fully closed. That's 24 responses out of a total of 44 said they would like to see it fully closed. Now, in October, officers did a safety audit, and one of the options was to ban all access through the area, fully close it to motorised traffic except cyclists, and positioning temporary measures such as concrete blocks at either end of the carriageway, banning all motor vehicles, and that would remove safety issues for residents. So at that time, option 1 was taken, but I'm asking you now to reconsider option 2, ban all access through this area except for cyclists and pedestrians, as that is the majority wish. And please start work on implementing a temporary trial order to close the bar to motorised traffic. And then in time, we can work up, and hopefully officers will support us with wider consultation, such as a My Bishop Hill type piece of work, community-led, which ward councillors are hoping to progress and would love help with. Many residents have said closing it completely would, for active travel only, would be a minor inconvenience, And for in the interest of greening our city, what a great opportunity to have a new piece of public realm there. So please could we get on with a trial order to close the bar to motorised traffic? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, which we'll respond to when we get to that item. My final speaker is Councillor Waters, who wishes to speak on general matters within the remit of the meeting. Is Councillor Waters there, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, do you want to tell us what you want to tell us?
Yep, I'm speaking this morning with reference to the parking chaos that the Council Highways Department has, under your direction as Executive Member, created in Osborwick and Merton. When I last spoke in November on this matter, I suggested that the expansion of the Badger Hill Residents Parking Scheme, without an accompanying solution to the university-related parking, and to a lesser extent Archbishop Holgate's school parking, was down to the stupidity of those involved. I'd like to apologise for equating this idiocy to the lack of common sense of those involved, as it's abundantly clear now from correspondence from yourself as Executive Member and the directed actions of staff that this chaos on roads in Osborwick and Merton is the result of a deliberate, malevolent action by all those involved. All of you have deliberately and quite cynically moved a problem from one area to another and completely disregarded seeking the very simple solutions of getting university-related parking onto the largely empty campus car parks, or indeed utilising the park and ride car parks with a shuttle bus or park and stride initiative. Why wouldn't a local authority, Highways Department, seek solutions to such problems? Why? Because the function has been hijacked by an anti-car zealot deliberately creating chaos and traffic congestion here and across York to further his aims. I note the e-petition with 119 signatures requesting action to solve and not just move the university-related problem that you were supposed to respond to by last Tuesday has just been ignored. Not surprising, because you don't want a solution. Obvious as having dumped this problem in Osborwick, you're going to further abuse your positions by chasing the parking along the highway with double yellow lining positions, the first of which has just been submitted, and no doubt work to imposing a residents' parking scheme to charge Osborwick and Merton residents for a problem you lot have deliberately created. I am, though, heartened by the residents who can see through the sheer idiocy of this situation and have started objecting to the double yellow line restrictions and have called on yourselves to seek solutions. Not just here, but all across York, the policies pursued under your direction as Executive Member for Transport are a disgrace, deliberately creating chaos, congestion and inconvenience. The sooner the elections in 2023 bring change, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the public participation stage of the meeting. Thank you for those comments, which have been noted. Item 3, I'm moving on to now, is receipt of 2 petitions. And I'm recommended to note the petitions and add them to the programme for further investigation and possible solutions. I've got with me some officers who will give us an update or just a summary of the points that have been raised by these petitions. So who's speaking to this one?
It is actually
David, is it?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to actually briefly explain the general background with both petitions. Obviously, we're acknowledging receipt of them, and I have done so to both ward members as well. Firstly, if we look at Irwin Avenue, Malton Avenue, quite a few strong concerns have been raised by residents through the ward councils and obviously through a petition, raising concerns about danger to local residents due to speeding traffic on both streets. They I've put forward various options, which we are more than happy to actually look into as part of a future programme. I also note that the speeding concern has also been raised with North Yorkshire Police, who are carrying out investigations through the speed management protocol. We haven't had any results from that as yet, so obviously we haven't had any confirmation whether there is an actual speeding concern there. We are obviously looking at actually proposing to actually look at this through a future speed management or danger reduction programme. So I'm happy to actually go along on that basis. With Black Dyke Lane and Manor Close, again, there's been quite a few concerns raised about road safety, and mainly at risk of serious accidents due to vehicles reportedly driving at inappropriate speeds, and also increasing volume traffic, including larger vehicles using the route through Poppleton, etc. It goes on to further explain that Black Dyke Lane is a narrow country lane, which is also partly residential. There are natural features such as a blind bend and a distinct lack of any footpaths as well. So obviously, it puts pressure on pedestrians, etc. Residents do actually consider that the lane is unsafe, and I put forward a number of potential options that you look into. This also has been raised with North Yorkshire Police through the speed management protocol, and again, we haven't had results from that as yet. We could also include this as part of our future programme, and in both cases, we are actually dependent on that advice of North Yorkshire Police with regards to the actual speeding concerns. We're recommending that the exit amendment notes both petitions and includes for these two sites to actually be included in the 2022 programmes for further investigation, and hopefully creating a number of potential options that you push forward with. Okay, thank you very much.
Right, thank you for that. Just to take them in reverse order, as you just referred to Black Dykes and Manor Cross. Certainly, Manor Cross certainly draws attention to the concerns that are raised by the Ward Council and the Parish Council, who would need to be consulted on possible solutions. Obviously, they will want to be involved in that process. On the other item, the Irwin Avenue and Moulton Avenue petition, I would like to just put on record that I have actually, I note the mention in the public speaker about the wider issues in the area, and I have already had a meeting with Heworth Ward councillors last week, in fact, on wider issues of congestion and traffic in the area, discussing some possible actions which might tie in with the concerns of some residents on Dodsworth Avenue, for instance. A suggestion by the petitioner given in Annex A about left turn only onto Heworth Green might also be looked at in that wider context about traffic issues affecting residents between Heworth Green and East Parade. So I have already discussed that with the ward councillors. I'm happy to work with them about whether that comes forward as a ward scheme or part of our programme in response to petition. Obviously can look at those wider implications, because I do acknowledge, as has been said, by several of the speakers, that what we do in one place impacts on elsewhere, but we are trying to address the immediate issues of direct concern for safety for residents and their particular concerns about parking, whatever it might be in a specific location. But we can't change everything at once, but we do have to look at the wider implications as we work through them. So I thank you for those two items, and I'm happy to agree with the recommendations for them to be added to the the programme of work for a further investigation. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So the next item I've got is item 4, Transport Capital Programme Monitor 2, which has amendments aligning with costs and delivery projections for a range of schemes. So if officers can outline some of the key points in this. Is this Tony's?
Morning, Chair.
Tony Dave, is it?
Yeah, Tony will take this forward, and then if you've got any comments on it, we'll answer those after, if that's okay.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, fine. Good morning, Councillor Dewan. The report sets out some changes to the capital programme across the board to accommodate amendments relating to the progress of schemes. So it deals with allocation changes for some of the major schemes where the programmes have been adjusted to tie in with the delivery of the planning application, for instance, for the Outer Ring Road, as we follow through on that, and consultation and more detailed feasibility work on the active travel programme schemes. I can also just deal with some of the comments which were raised by the speakers. So one of the points that Robin Jenkel made about the allocation for funding for some of the projects in the capital programme, the larger projects are, most of them are grant funded. We have to put in bid applications to fund those schemes, and they also include significant elements of active travel improvements as well, particularly for the Outer Ring Road. That gives us the opportunity to increase capacity on the ring road, which allows other items to be changed within the city centre, providing more road space for active travel, and also provides in the scheme itself significant improvements such as subways and lengths of cycle route along the side of the Outer Ring Road as well. Coppergate scheme, just to raise that there will be interim changes put in place in line with the report that was taken through at the end of last year to improve the position for cyclists, and we will be progressing further investigation in that area for a more permanent solution. The barriers on the barrier report, we are now progressing the survey element of that report. Most of the barriers, they are in place.
This is to do with cycle barriers. You're talking on the off-road routes, is it?
That's correct. Yes, the cycle barrier. So we are undertaking the survey work for that. The barriers are in place for a variety of reasons. So it's access restrictions, which may be related to antisocial behaviour to prevent that happening, or safety concerns about people using the route or exiting a route into a trafficked area. So we are progressing those at the moment. The city centre access item, the hostile vehicle mitigation that Councillor Melly raised, I think that was covered extensively at the executive last week, so I won't make any further comment on that. The Victoria Bar item, so we made some amendments to the access in that area in relation to safety concerns that have been raised by residents. That was an interim solution. There is still a permanent solution to work through, but that needs to be integrated with a wider consideration of access in the area. In terms of the petition, it'd be useful, or the survey would be useful to see that survey information that came through from local residents. I just should raise one point that I think there are over 300 properties in the area, so a further survey would need to be undertaken to make sure that that was the approach that people were preferred to be taken in the area.
Yeah, well, I'm quite happy to take that forward outside this meeting with officers to go through whatever legal processes are required. I appreciate that there are sort of legal actions that need to be taken to make changes on the highway, but I think I welcome the ward councillors' efforts to try and establish what the broad view of residents in the area might be, at least in the short term, while that wider piece of work is going on. So,
if I could just,
as you're aware, we did have, I did at the time sort of consider with officers the two options which we had at the time, and having gone with the current one, it seems as though there's slightly more in favour of changing this current situation than are happy with it as it is. So we do need to look at that to respond to residents' concerns.
If I could just say that the restrictions that are in place for permit holders only to run through the Victoria Bar do remain in place and are signed and enforceable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So so I welcome that, but also we did identify, this was again going back in, seems like at least 2 years ago now, the views of the three ward councillors in the area of preference for a review of traffic in the whole area and the best solutions which officers have now identified should be part of looking at the city centre traffic circulation arrangements, which we hope to do in the coming months. I'd also just want to put on record, welcome the news that's in paragraph 39 about the appointment of project managers to take forward the active travel schemes, such as the one on Tadcaster Road, which we've got later on the agenda. Are there any other points to make on this report?
Yeah, just before we close this item, Chair, I just wanted to, this is Tony's last sort of formal contribution to this meeting as Head of Transport before stepping into his new role. So I just wanted to thank Tony for all his efforts formally from my perspective. He served the city with distinction over the years that he's been Head of Transport. Well,
thank you. Yes, I hadn't realised that this was your swan song, so to speak. We're not losing you from the authority, but from the post. But thank you very much for all your contributions over the years.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So with that comment, I'm happy to approve this report, and just to note, as has been said in the response to the item about barriers, I do identify, I do recognise that this is, a key issue of concern for a significant number of cyclists of all shapes and sizes, whether they're using cargo bikes or whatever, being able to access some of our off-road routes. So I welcome that work moving forward as quickly as possible, in conjunction with the Cycle Campaign and other organisations that might want to have input to that process. I'm happy to move on from that item to the next item, which is item 5, Burton Stone Lane traffic calming scheme. I'm joined for this by Louise, who's my highway engineer's done some work on this. I'm particularly pleased, I'd just like to say a few words before coming to officers, particularly pleased to see this coming forward following work initiated through the Ward Highways programme that gives ward councillors the ability to listen to local communities, bring forward highway projects to respond to local concerns. Obviously, that has to be it's balanced against more urgent work that as an authority we're doing, but we do see that as a real opportunity for ward councillors to represent concerns in their area. So the proposals here take the opportunity to update worn out traffic calming measures, but also more effectively achieve respect for 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in this residential area, while taking account of the safety of all cyclists using the route. I'm grateful to officers for engaging with various options and making amendments to try to ensure that the design is as inclusive as possible while still achieving the objective. So do you want to say something about the different options that we've looked at and where we've got to?
Yeah. I'll just briefly summarise a lot of it. As you said before, it's all in the report. The Clifton Ward team allocated the ward funding for a review of the existing traffic calming on Burton Stone Lane between the A19 and Grosvenor Road. The existing cushions are deteriorating, increasing vehicle speed, and the layout is such on a narrow carriageway that it's pushing vehicles towards the curb. So it's uncomfortable for pedestrians, and it's also squeezing cyclists. So the proposals have been developed to, well, not more or less, scrap what's there already, replace one pair of speed cushions with a full width speed table. This is because of the proximity to the A19 junction, and then 2 sets of priority narrowings with single cushions with, to be fair, I think the best spacings we can do to provide at least a 1.2 metre gap for cyclists, to make it more in line with current guidance. And to the north, there's replacing a triple pair of cushions with a triple set of cushions rather, with 1 pair of speed cushions, again to improve the spacings. We've had a generally favourable response to the consultation. Some issues have been raised, some we can address with fairly minor amendments, the detail, the spacing, the road markings, that kind of thing, and also repositioning a bus stop, which is all shown in Annex E.
Thank you for that. I also note, obviously, the comments from Councillor Myers, both in the written report and his contribution at the start of the meeting. And in particular, he drew attention to the full width speed table to slow vehicles down as they enter the road from the A19. I'd also note the concerns of bus operators and reference to emergency services. Inevitably, on a key route such as this, there's that difficult balance to be made. But I think on balance, even though I do also acknowledge the fact that had a written representation from one household that lives quite close to the traffic calming feature, the chicane, and inevitably there will be a detrimental impact on some residents, but overall, on balance, having considered all the issues, I agree with the recommendations for option 3, as in Annex E, with those slight amendments to give the maximum possible gap on the near side cushions to cater for trikes and cycle trailers. As you say, we've got constrained width, and it is quite difficult, even with only single line working, to accommodate that on the cushions, which are a key point of trying to ensure that we don't sort of adversely impact too much on buses and emergency vehicles, but nevertheless achieve the appropriate traffic speeds in the area. So I have also just wanted to note that whatever final design, we need to ensure that there's ongoing monitoring and an appropriate cleaning regime to ensure that cycle bypass arrangements are kept swept and in a safe condition. So I would, on that basis, I would recommend that we sign off the amended proposals as you've put forward in option 3. So thank you very much for all your work on this. I appreciate it. Obviously quite a lot of time and effort, and do recognise that the residents have expected this for a period of time. So hopefully it will now move forward as quickly as we are able to towards implementation, so that residents and the ward councillors can see the end product in place having a beneficial effect for the community in the area.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for that. So that moves on now to item 6, which is the Tadcaster Road Sustainable Travel Scheme. So I don't know if Office we got joined for this by Julian Ridge. So do you want to say something about the scheme and also any particular points that were raised in response to the cycle campaign?
Of course, yes. Just as an introduction to this item is essentially an update on the rather longer report that was taken to the October 2021 decision session, where Councillor de Gorn asked for more clarity about one or two of the items along Tadcaster Road. So this report itself reports back on 6 specific items along Tadcaster Road, the first of which is a very short stretch of the off-road cycle path near Naysmire Road, where there's a need to widen the path to get around a tree. Then there is comment about the long length of path adjacent to the Naysmire, where Tadcaster Road isn't wide enough to accommodate cycle lanes in both directions. Third item that we're discussing is detail around the Slingsbury Grove shops area and how we can accommodate cycle movements and a crossing and a bus stop within a relatively small area of Tadcaster Road. The fourth item is Moor Lane Roundabout. The fifth is the section between Moor Lane Roundabout and Simbold Lane, where we haven't quite resolved the design yet. And the final item to comment on is around light segregation. So in terms of what we're recommending on each of these items, for the first item around Naysmire Road, our proposal is that there would appear to be a number of approaches that can be taken here. We're working to define these with the consultants who are leading design of the scheme, and we're proposing that an officer decision can be taken on what to do here in consultation with yourself.
Is that location 1 that you're referring to?
That is location, yes, that is location 1.
I might throw in my comments at the same time as we go down the locations, if that's okay.
Of course,
So,
do you want to do
so,
do that?
So I've got, as is being stated in paragraph 5, the key objective, or a key objective of funding, is to try and achieve as continuous cycle lanes along Tadcaster Road, and then a number of more detailed items we've identified needing further work. So I'm happy to agree with the proposal for location 1, which is further work on whatever's needed to move the boundary fence and to widen that as necessary. So I'm happy with that one.
Okay. Location 2 is the section between Pullin Drive and Nelson's Lane, and the cycle campaign have raised the point that they would prefer to see a section of off-road lane there. I think my comment is that yes, I would agree with them that in engineering terms that is the best thing to do there, but within this scheme that option unfortunately is not affordable. So we will continue to look at the options around there, and that will be something that we look at within our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which we will shortly be beginning work on. Ita, do you have any comments on that section, Councillor?
Yes. So this is reference to option. Is that the recommended options? Option 2B, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the only sort of concern which I think we would need to look at in some detail there is about how that relates to the drives that are going across the cycle lane. I'm not sure exactly how many are involved, but obviously there will be vehicle and cyclist interaction when anybody goes in or out of their drive at that point. I mean, I suppose it's no different from somebody joining a road. If it's on the road, we just need to might be sort of just some clarity about that for the residents who are most directly affected.
We can do that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Shall we move on to location 3?
Yeah.
The cycle campaign particularly raised the question, firstly, of bus stop bypass, but also that they would prefer the cycle lane to go between the footway and the cars, and I can say a little bit about why we're not proposing to do that in this location. As with all of these things, you are having to balance different safety priorities here. The view we took at this location was that if you provided a lane between the footway and the cars, it meant that you pushed the cars further out into the carriageway because you only have a limited amount of overall space. In doing it, but there would be a proportion of cyclists who would always stay on the carriageway. And if you pushed the cars further out into the carriageway, you would end up in a position where the cyclists who remained on the carriageway would have a much narrower carriageway to accommodate them. So our view is that the safest method, or the safest way that we can tackle that particular problem, is to have the lane where we propose it to be.
Right. Okay. Well, just a couple of points I've got there. One is that there's a loading bay is part of that area, I believe, isn't it? So we just need to make sure that the depth of that space is sufficient for it's mostly going to be light vans of one sort or another doing local deliveries, because obviously that potentially could eat into that buffer zone that you've got. And secondly, in terms of the surface treatment, we might want to try and make that as prominent as possible. I know normally we only put green surfacing over junctions, but we could consider that as an option to make it more prominent to drivers getting in and out. And hopefully, if I get a quick plug in for the revised highway code that's coming in, one of the points in the new highway code is advocating the Dutch reach. In other words, using your left hand to open the driver's door so you turn and look out for cyclists. It makes it more, so that there are some changes, hopefully, which will impact in time on our approach to pedestrian and cycle provision, but that's coming in shortly. And just the point about, as you said, in relation to whether it's inside or outside, I think the dilemma we have here is that we've got a mixture of on-road and off-road. If we had a continuous cycle lane off-road either side of the shops, it would be logical to continue. But if the previous proposal was sort of switching between one and another, as you say, then there will be some cyclists who choose to stay on road. And I know from personal experience, we had a similar situation on Fulford Road many years ago with a bus lane and an off-road cycle road. It did make it much more difficult with a narrow carriageway width for those cyclists who stayed on the road. So, on balance, I'm happy to recommend the design that you've got here. We did. I think it's worth stressing that the reason we're having this conversation now is because the original design, there was an agreement to bring it back with having done more detailed work, and having done that detailed work, this is your recommendation. So we do need to move on with implementing this alongside the maintenance scheme, which will hopefully minimise the disruption by doing the two together. So, I'm happy with that one. Do you want to move on to, is it location 4 next?
Location 4 is Moor Lane Roundabout, and the proposal here is that that the works at Moor Lane Roundabout are taken out of this scheme for more detailed consideration. It's a very, very complicated junction. I'm glad in a way that the cycle campaign understand why we're taking that stance, and we'll be happy to work with them and other stakeholders going forward to try and identify the best solution in that location.
Thank you. I think on that one, I very much welcome anything that we can do to improve cycling. I know that you have already done a little bit of work in terms of modelling about traffic impact, but personally, having experienced this over many years on a regular basis, I do know that motorists don't really make space for cycles to reach the on-road cycle lane once you get down towards the college. There might be quite often queuing around the roundabout. Anything we can do to sort of in the short term would be good. But I welcome the design you've got in Annex C, which potentially could be implemented along with the ZAR scheme for the crossing, which is made reference to, which in particular, from the point of view of encouraging cyclists to use the off-road facility, a single stage crossing would be much better than what we've got at the moment. But that would need to be looked at in good time, well before we get to the using jargon now, the traffic signal asset renewal, I believe it is, isn't it? Programme for replacing those signals, consider whether or not that design is more appropriate than what we have at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think it's crucial to get that right as soon as we can.
Okay. Location 5 is the area between Moor Lane Roundabout and Simbolt Lane Junction and Cemetery Corner. And I think I would admit we haven't quite resolved this one yet. So we will have to come back to you later with a proposal for what we do at this particular location. I don't know, do you have any comments on?
Yeah, just on that one, my comment would be that is critical, really, in my view, to the whole scheme from the perspective of anybody who lives in Cotmanthorpe, or anyone who's walking from Dringhouses or wherever out to Askham Bog, because that is a route, and it is, anyone coming and visiting would be shocked to even realise that it's intended to be shared use of pedestrians and cycles at the moment, because it is such a pinch point that does need addressing as quickly as we can. So I would strongly urge that whatever solutions we can find there, we move forward as quickly as possible.
Yes,
because without it, it doesn't feel like a complete route, certainly from Cotmanthorpe residents' perspective.
Yes, Cemetery Corner is clearly a priority for what we do there. The 6th item is the item on light segregation. Now, I know this has been quite contentious. What we're proposing is an approach which provides light segregation at points where it is really required, but does not go down the road of providing ones all the way along Tadcaster Road, because we realised that a corridor like this one, that's probably not appropriate. I don't know if you have a comment you'd like to make. I very much welcome the commitment to implement and evaluate this light segregation, which is quite clearly identified in gear change and LTM 120 standard, which the government published in the summer of 2020, alongside announcing this funding. Well, the funding, which is not actually for this one, but for the other active travel schemes. It certainly has been shown to have significant benefit in encouraging less confident cyclists and reducing instances of close passes. For example, drivers cutting in to pass a vehicle waiting to turn right, which I believe is a sort of type of location which you've identified where they would be provided. And as you've listed in paragraph 30, the proposal is to use both type 1 and 2 selectively. And I'm sure we will get feedback from councillors, residents and the cycle campaign to help us to evaluate the benefits of both types. And plenty of advice is available, obviously, from other authorities who are ahead of us in installing these, with different designs and different scenarios, shall we say. So I do look forward to this scheme moving forward as part of the maintenance project. So just the only other point I was going to make was that in addition to the sort of
rail and post type arrangements where for on carriageway. We've also got some locations where you've got a segregated track, which is a type 2, isn't it?
Yes, the stepped. This is the stepped track.
One, that's what I was trying to remember.
So partly to respond to the queries that Robin Jankel raised, there are a problem that we have with Tadcaster Road, which we have with many roads in York, is that the width varies. There are sections of Tadcaster Road that are 11.5 metres wide, and there are sections which are only just over 8 metres wide. We have to work with that in providing cycle lanes. One way that you can provide a degree of cycle priority with a slightly reduced width lane, so towards instead of the desirable minimum of 2 metres, you can use in some circumstances the absolute minimum of 1.5. You can provide that by stepping the cycle lane up, which is what we're proposing to do in the area around Middlethorpe Grove and the Horseshoe, where Tadcaster Road is relatively narrow.
Okay. And I mean, again, I'm sure the cycle campaign will stress the significant, these facilities, once you're on them, are fine, but getting on and off them and the treatment when you come to side roads and so on is critical, to try and make sure that we can provide a priority route for cycling, which is visible and obvious to all other road users, the fact that they are there, whatever weather conditions or time of day or night. Obviously we need to keep the visual intrusion to a minimum, but we do also need to make sure that road users don't try and pull off onto them. For instance, I've seen them post recently about an emergency vehicle trying to get past somewhere, and people need to be aware of the fact that they're there and they are intended to keep vehicles off that section of road. I mean, I think we shouldn't have a problem in this location, given that it won't be continuous along the full length of the road anyhow. It will just be at key locations. I am also aware that there have been representations made of concerns about the loss of the right turn pockets, and there was also mention about St Helens Road Junction. So again, we would probably need to a certain extent, we just have to move ahead with the scheme, but keep it under review to see if there are other measures that we need to make once it's in place.
We do. I mean, it's all this is a slightly movable feast, and there are things that we will be looking at within the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. But the priority here is to outline a scheme that we can be certain about, that we can deliver within the funding that we've got for the Tadcaster Road corridor. And I think it's important generally to make the point with these schemes. There are lots and lots of things that you can do, but actually we have a limited amount of funding and a limited delivery, a limited time window to deliver the scheme. So what we're outlining is what we can do within that funding to hit that delivery window, and that's a very important part.
And I think, as you say, this is it's actually the first sort of corridor that we will have implemented since 2020 and the funding that was made available to us. So as you have noted in the report, it does give us the opportunity to learn from experience as we move forward with other corridor schemes, to try and ensure that we get the balance right between as near continuous segregated route as is feasible, but ensure that there's safety and confidence for cyclists when they do have to inevitably cross junctions and side roads and drives and those sorts of things.
Absolutely, yeah.
So on that note, I'm happy to approve this moving forward, to take advantage of the working in conjunction with the maintenance scheme to maximise the efficiency and limit disruption to a travelling public, and so support the recommendations as we've discussed.
Well, thank you very much.
subject, of course, to the Chief Operating Officer agreeing with us all. So that concludes that item. I don't have any urgent business unless anybody else does. So at 11 o'clock, I will conclude the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.